The world is a grainy shade of gray, a silent movie projected onto a 14-inch screen. My hands are on the throttle and stick, but my body is 7,000 miles away from the desert unfolding below. Here, in the chilled, dimly lit ground control station, the only sound is the low hum of servers and the soft, rhythmic click of Sergeant Marcus Thorne's keyboard. The air smells of recycled air and stale coffee. Ghost One, this is Sandcastle Actual. We are pinned down, taking effective fire from the compound due east, grid Echo 7-9er. The voice crackles through my headset, tight with a controlled panic I've learned to recognize instantly. It's Lieutenant Ben Carter. I've listened to his voice for 3 weeks. Young, earnest, now edged with the metallic taste of fear. Copy Sandcastle, I say, my voice a flatline. Calm is my first weapon. We have eyes on, stand by. On the screen, the infrared crosshairs of our MQ-9 Reaper float over a collection of mud brick buildings. The heat signatures of Carter's patrol are bright white clusters, huddled behind a low wall. From the eastern compound, smaller, fainter signatures flit between doorways and windows. Muzzle flashes, invisible to our camera, are translated into the frantic calls on the radio. "Talk to me, Marcus," I murmur, my gaze fixed on the screen. My partner doesn't need more instruction. We've been doing this dance for years. He's 28, 4 years my junior, but in this darkened cocoon, age is irrelevant. We are a single organism. I am the decision, he is the eye. "Lasing the target now," he says, his fingers dancing across his console. A new icon appears on my screen, a diamond of solid light hovering over the largest building in the enemy compound. The laser rangefinder paints it with invisible precision. Hellfire is hot and ready, wind is negligible. They're clustered tight in there, L. It's a good shot. A good shot. The euphemism hangs in the sterile air. A good shot means a high probability of obliterating the men trying to kill Ben Carter and his soldiers. A bad shot means collateral damage, a miss, or worse, a missile landing on the wrong side of that wall. The weight of the decision is a physical pressure on my sternum, a cold, dense stone. Sandcastle Actual, Ghost One, we are ready to engage. Confirm you are clear of the eastern wall. Danger close. Confirmed, Ghost One. For God's sake, do it. Carter's voice is a sharp crack. My thumb hovers over the red button on my joystick. The world narrows to the gray screen, the glowing diamond, the faint static of Carter's breathing in my ear. I don't think about the men in the compound as men. I can't. They are coordinates. A problem to be solved. A threat to be neutralized. I exhale, a slow, deliberate breath, and press the button. Rifle, 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 I state into the comms. There is no shuddering launch, no roar of engines. There is only the silent, digital commitment. On the screen, a tiny, sleek shape detaches from the Reaper's wing and streaks towards the Earth, a predator descending on a wire of data. Marcus and I watch, motionless. The only sound is the hum of the machines. 17 seconds. That's how long it takes for the missile to travel from 30,000 feet to its destination. 17 seconds of silent, breathless anticipation where the entire universe is contained within the screen. The gray screen flares into blinding white. The building disintegrates into a cloud of pixels. The heat signatures within vanish. Splash, Marcus says, his voice a low exhalation. Target destroyed. A beat of silence, then Carter's voice, thick with relief. Ghost One, thank you. You just saved our asses. All elements are secure. Glad you're okay, Sandcastle, I reply, the professional calm still masking the adrenaline tremor deep in my hands. Ghost One is remaining on station to provide overwatch for your exfil. I lean back in the padded leather chair, the first movement I've allowed myself in 20 minutes. The tension in my shoulders is a dull ache. Marcus pulls off his headset and runs a hand through his short-cropped hair. He looks at me, his face illuminated by the ghostly light of the screens. Hell of a thing, he says, his usual bravado replaced by a weary honesty. Kid sounds like he just graduated yesterday. He's 24, I say, the statistic coming automatically. I know all their ages. I make it a point to know. It's easier to be responsible for a person than for a call sign. Yeah, well, he's got a few more birthdays coming thanks to us. Marcus swivels his chair towards me. You okay? You were locked in pretty tight. I'm fine, I say, the automatic response. I'm always fine. Fine is the baseline. Fine is what keeps the screen from blurring, what keeps my voice steady when a 19-year-old rifleman is screaming for a medic over the radio. I unclip my harness and stand, my body feeling strangely heavy, tethered to the earth after spending the last 6 hours floating in the digital stratosphere. An hour later, we're sitting across from Major David Chen in his utilitarian office. The decor is standard-issue Air Force, framed photos of aircraft, a flag in the corner, a desk devoid of any personal clutter. Major Chen is 45, with the kind of weathered composure that suggests he's seen more screens and more debriefs than either of us could imagine. He listens intently as we walk him through the engagement, his eyes flicking between us. "Clean execution," he says when we finish, steepling his fingers. The after-action from Sandcastle is already glowing. Lieutenant Carter specifically mentioned the calm and professional demeanor of the Ghost crew. He's convinced you're orbiting right above his head like a guardian angel. I nod, accepting the praise as the procedural thing it is. It's not about praise, it's about confirmation that the system worked, that I performed my function. "It was a textbook deployment, sir," I say. "Textbook doesn't mean easy," Chen counters, his gaze lingering on me. He has kind eyes, which is a dangerous thing for a commander to have. It makes you want to tell him the truth. "That's your third high-stress close air support mission this week. And what is that, the 47th save for you too?" Marcus shifts in his seat. "Something like that, sir." 47 soldiers who are going home because of your skill," Chen says, and the number hangs in the room, suddenly immense. 47. It felt like a tally of competence in the moment, but in the quiet of his office it feels like a weight. He leans forward, his voice dropping into a softer, more personal register. "Elena, I'm signing off on a mandatory 96-hour leave for you, effective 700 tomorrow." The words land like a physical blow. "Sir, with all due respect, the surge op isn't over. Sandcastle's unit is still in the valley. They need coverage." "Have coverage," Captain Johansson's crew is cycling on. "The war can wait for 4 days, Captain." His tone is firm, leaving no room for argument, but his eyes are still soft. It's the look he gets when he's making a decision for your own good, a look I've seen him give other pilots before they quietly disappeared from the roster for a few weeks, returning with a hollowed-out look in their eyes. I'd heard the rumors about a pilot he'd lost years ago, a friend who never came back from leave, not really. That loss was a ghost in every one of Chen's protective decisions. "I don't need a break, sir, I'm sharp." The protest sounds weak even to me. "It's not a suggestion, Elena, it's an order. A pilot who is too tired to see straight is a danger to everyone. A broken pilot saves no one." He says the last part with a finality that closes the subject. He's used that phrase before, it's his creed. He'd rather have a rested pilot who might be rusty than a burnt-out one who makes a fatal mistake. Use the time, disconnect, go see something that isn't a screen, that's an order. "Yes, sir," I say, the words tasting like ash. Marcus and I walk out of the building into the blinding Nevada afternoon. The heat is dry and oppressive, a stark contrast to the perpetual chill of the GCS. The base is a sprawling monument to order, manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, the distant shriek of fighter jets taking off from a different part of the field. A world away from the dust and chaos of the Kunar Valley. 96 hours, Marcus says, shaking his head. "What the hell are you going to do for 4 days?" "I don't know," I admit. My life is the base, the GCS, my sterile apartment just off post. The rhythm of shifts, briefings, and missions structures my existence. 4 empty days stretch before me like a desert. "Well, you're not going to sit in your apartment staring at the walls," he says, reading my mind. "That's not disconnecting, that's just changing the channel to a blank screen. Listen, I'm driving up to see my dad tomorrow. He's been asking about you. Why don't you come with?" Dr. Eris Thorne, Marcus's father, a history professor. I'd met him once a year ago at a base function. A quiet man with a gentle handshake and eyes that held a deep, calm intelligence. He represented a universe I had no map for, a world of books, of ancient conflicts resolved for centuries, of quiet contemplation. The thought of making polite conversation for a whole day was exhausting. "I don't want to intrude, Marcus." "You wouldn't be intruding, he'd love it. Seriously, Elle, it'll get you out of your head, get some fresh air, real air, not this recycled crap." He gestures vaguely at the sky. "It's just a couple of hours north. We'll have dinner, stay the night, come back the next day. That's 2 of your 4 days handled." I look at him at the genuine concern in his face. He feels the weight of this life too, but he wears it differently. He talks about it, jokes about it, lets it out. I bury it deep, where it can't interfere with the mission. But here, with no mission for 4 days, I can feel it stirring, a dormant creature beginning to shift in the dark. "Okay," I say, the word surprising me. "Okay, I'll come." My apartment that evening is a tomb. The silence is absolute, a heavy blanket smothering the echoes of the day. In the GCS, the silence was active, pregnant with data and potential threat. Here, it's just empty. I stand in the middle of my living room, still in my flight suit, and the events of the afternoon replay behind my eyes in perfect Chinese letter detail. The gray compound, the laser diamond, the white flash. I walk to the kitchen and open the refrigerator. The light is too bright. The contents are sparse, utilitarian. I close it without taking anything. I should eat, but the idea of food is repulsive. My body is still buzzing with a phantom energy, the aftermath of the adrenaline rush with no physical outlet. I had been sitting still, but every muscle in my body felt like it had just run a marathon. I pour a glass of water and sit on my sofa, staring at the blank, black screen of my television. I try to remember what I used to do before this, before the war became a thing I conducted from a chair in the desert. I used to read. I used to go for long runs. I had a life once, with friends and hobbies and thoughts that didn't revolve around grid coordinates and rules of engagement. Now, my mind is a map of Afghanistan. I know the contours of those valleys better than I know the streets of my own town. I know the pattern of life in villages whose names I can't pronounce. I know the sound of a young man's voice when he believes he is about to die, and the sound of his voice when he is given a second chance. Lieutenant Ben Carter's grateful, relieved tone echoes in the quiet room. "You just saved our asses." For him, the event is over. He's probably sitting with his men now, sharing a joke, the fear already fading into a war story. For me, it's frozen, a data point added to the ever-growing file, another ghost in my machine. I think of Major Chen's order. Disconnect. How do you disconnect a part of your own mind? The war isn't a switch I can flip off. It's a constant, low-grade hum in my consciousness, a parallel reality running just beneath the surface of this quiet Nevada evening. The sense of responsibility is a tether that can't be severed by a 4-day pass. Those 47 soldiers are a ledger of success, but also a chain. Each one is a life that became my burden the moment I took control of the Reaper tasked with protecting them. I finally change out of my flight suit, the heavy fabric feeling like a second skin I'm reluctant to shed. In civilian clothes, jeans, and a plain t-shirt, I feel oddly vulnerable, like a soldier out of uniform. I lie in bed, but sleep is a distant country. Every time I close my eyes, I see the infrared landscape. The white-hot signatures of men, the cold, calculating crosshairs. My phone buzzes on the nightstand. A text from Marcus, leaving at 900 from my place. Dad says he's making his famous chili. Don't be late. I stare at the message. A simple plan, a car ride, a meal with a history professor and his son, a world of mundane, ordinary things. It felt like a lifeline being thrown into the suffocating silence of my apartment. It was a distraction, a temporary mission to replace the one that had been taken away. A mission to be normal for just a couple of days. I typed a reply, "See you at 900. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Outside, a car door slammed, a normal sound from a normal world. I tried to focus on it, to anchor myself to the here and now. But my mind, trained for a different kind of focus, was already drifting back to the gray, silent skies over the Hindu Kush, waiting for the next call that wouldn't come. The ghost in the machine, unable to power down. The world outside the car window was a smear of impossible green. For 3 hours, it had been an assault on my senses, a relentless torrent of life that felt alien and vaguely hostile. The desert, my desert, was a study in muted tones, the pale tan of sand, the dusty olive of scrub brush, the washed-out blue of a high sky. It was a palette I understood, a landscape of clarity and stark truths. This was chaos. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping a rhythm against the door frame to some country song I didn't recognize. He'd swapped his flight suit for jeans and a faded t-shirt, and he looked younger. Less like the sharp-eyed professional who could guide a hellfire missile through a teacup, and more like someone who might help you move a couch on a Saturday. "You're quiet," he said, not taking his eyes off the twisting two-lane road. "Even for you." "Just watching the scenery," I said, my voice sounding thin in the close space of the car. It was more than that. It was the sheer texture of it all. The way the leaves on the trees shimmered individually in the breeze, each one a tiny, fluttering flag of a life I'd forgotten. The garish, defiant yellow of a line of daffodils along a fence, the deep, rich brown of freshly turned earth in a field. After the sterile, climate-controlled, gray and beige environment of the base and the ground control station, it was overwhelming. My eyes ached from the effort of processing it. This was a world in color, a world that was alive and breathing, and it felt a million miles away from the black-and-white thermal reality I inhabited for 12 hours a day. "Dad's excited you came," Marcus offered, filling the silence I'd left hanging. "He doesn't get a lot of visitors who aren't students trying to bump their grade from a B to an A." "I'm not much of a conversationalist these days," I muttered, watching a red barn slide past, its paint so bright it looked like a child's drawing. "Trust me, you don't have to be. He'll do all the talking. You just have to nod and look intellectual." He shot me a grin. "You've got the nod down pat." We pulled into the small college town just after noon. It was the kind of place that seemed to exist in a permanent state of autumn, all brick buildings covered in ivy and coffee shops filled with students staring at laptops. Marcus's father, Dr. Eris Thorne, lived in a modest, two-story house a few streets from the campus. It was old, the white paint peeling slightly around the window frames, but it was surrounded by a lush, slightly overgrown garden that seemed to embrace the structure rather than decorate it. The inside was exactly as I'd imagined, and yet somehow more. It was a landscape of paper and ink. Books were everywhere. They lined shelves that bowed under their weight, stood in precarious stacks on the floor, occupied every flat surface. The air smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and the faint, sweet scent of pipe tobacco. It was the complete antithesis of my quarters on base. There was no order here, no sterile efficiency. It was a beautiful, comfortable clutter of a life lived in the mind. Eris Thorne emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was a tall man, with Marcus's same dark, intelligent eyes, but his were set in a network of fine lines that spoke of a lifetime of smiling and squinting at text. His hair was a shock of white, and he moved with a gentle, unhurried grace that immediately lowered the ambient tension in the room by several degrees. "Marcus," he said, his voice a warm, rumbling baritone. He clasped his son's shoulder firmly. Then his gaze turned to me. "And you must be Captain Vance. Marcus has told me so much about you. It's an honor to meet the woman who keeps this one in line." "The honor is mine, sir," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, dry. "None of that, sir, business in this house," he chided gently. "I'm Eris, and lunch is ready. I hope you like stew. It's the only thing I can make that doesn't involve setting off the smoke alarm." We ate at a small wooden table in the kitchen. The stew was hearty and flavorful, and the conversation was easy, largely because Eris expertly steered it away from anything related to Nevada or Afghanistan. He talked about a departmental dispute over the fall semester schedule, a rare book he'd finally tracked down, the stubborn rose bush in the back garden that refused to bloom. Marcus chimed in with stories of Eris's legendary inability to operate any piece of technology invented after 1985. It was normal. It was terrifyingly, beautifully normal. After lunch, Marcus announced he was going to the store to pick up a few things for dinner, leaving me alone with his father. Eris led me into his study, the heart of the book-filled labyrinth. He gestured to a worn leather armchair while he settled into another opposite me, a small table with a chessboard between us. "Do you play, Captain?" he asked. "Elena," I corrected, and no, not really. It always seemed abstract. He smiled, a quiet, knowing expression. A game of perfect information. Both players see the whole board, all the pieces, all the moves, a rare thing in life. He didn't set up the pieces. Instead, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Marcus tells me you see quite a lot from your chair." The shift was so smooth I almost missed it. He hadn't asked about drones or war. He'd asked about sight, about perspective. "I see a video feed," I said, my default, clinical response kicking in automatically. It's data. Thermal signatures, coordinates, patterns of movement. Data, he repeated, the word hanging in the air between us like a dust mote in a sunbeam. The legions of Rome saw data. The centurion on a hill, looking down at the chaos of a battle. The general in his tent, moving pieces on a map. They all reduced men to numbers, to positions, to assets and liabilities. It is the oldest dance of command, the necessity of distance to see clearly, and the curse of that same distance to feel remotely. I stared at him. In a few sentences, he had articulated the central paradox of my existence, the tightrope I walked every single day. He had given it a history, a context that stretched back millennia. It didn't make it easier. It made it heavier. "The curse," I said softly, almost to myself. "Oh yes," he said, his voice gentle but unwavering. "To make a decision that ends a life or saves one from a place of safety, it creates a unique form of ghosts. The ghost of the person you ended and the ghost of the person you were before you did it. They both haunt you. Not with screams, perhaps, but with silence. With the terrible, weighty silence of a choice made in a room far away from its consequences." His words found the hairline fractures in my composure, the ones that had been spreading since my thumb had pressed that button, since the screen had flashed white and then gone to static. I looked away, my gaze falling on a shelf of books about ancient Greece. How, I began, my throat tight. How did they bear it, the generals, the commanders? Eris was silent for a long moment, his eyes full of a deep, quiet understanding that felt both ancient and immediate. "Some didn't," he said finally. "They broke under the weight of their own omniscience. Others built walls around that part of their soul and never looked back. The great ones, the rare ones, they found a way to hold both truths at once, the strategic necessity and the human cost. They carried the weight without letting it crush them or harden them. It is the most difficult balance there is." Before I could form a response, a sound from the living room broke the spell. Marcus had returned and turned on the television. The bright, jarring cadence of a news anchor's voice sliced through the quiet wisdom of the study. Reporting live from Washington, the Pentagon has confirmed the name of the soldier killed in Monday's engagement in Helmand Province. He is Specialist Jeremy Miller, 20 years old, from Boise, Idaho. He was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 7th Infantry Regiment. The incident is under investigation, but early reports indicate. The words hit me like a physical blow. The 2nd Battalion, 7th Infantry, Sandcastle's unit. We provided overwatch for them just last week. A routine patrol, a few tense moments, but no engagement. We'd watch them walk back to the fob, laughing and shoving each other, their thermal signatures blooming with the heat of their living bodies against the cool desert night. Specialist Jeremy Miller, 20 years old. I didn't realize I had stood up until I felt the armchair behind my knees. The room tilted. The colors of the books, the green from the garden outside the window, the rich brown of the wood, it all swirled into a nauseating vortex. The sterile data was gone. It was replaced by a face I would never see, a mother in Idaho answering a knock on her door. A life gone. A life I was responsible for protecting. And I had failed. I was supposed to be their guardian angel, their all-seeing eye. I had the whole board, all the pieces, all the moves, and I had missed something. I must have. I'd been distracted or tired, or I'd misinterpreted a signal. While I was sitting in a chair in Nevada, a kid from Idaho had died on my watch. The guilt was instantaneous and visceral, a white-hot spike driven into my sternum, stealing my breath. "Elena," Eris's voice came from far away, full of concern. I mumbled something, an apology, an excuse, I don't know. I stumbled out of the study, past Marcus, who was frozen in the living room, staring at the TV with a pale, grim face. I shoved open the screen door and practically fell into the back garden. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and flowers. Bees buzzed. It was obscenely peaceful. I gripped the rough wood of the garden fence, my knuckles white, and tried to remember how to breathe. Each gasp was a ragged, insufficient thing. The world started to tunnel, the vibrant green of the lawn darkening at the edges. I was back in the GCS, the headset squeezing my skull, the chill of the air conditioning raising goosebumps on my arms. Lieutenant Carter's voice, tight with controlled panic. "Ghost One, we are pinned down." The cold, dense stone of the decision in my gut, the flash on the screen. But this time, there was no tactical success. This time, there was only a silent return to base, a name on a news report, and a failure that was entirely my own. I sank to my knees in the soft grass, the weight of 47 saves evaporating under the crushing guilt of the one I'd lost. The compartment doors I'd spent a career welding shut were blowing open, one after another, and the emotional turbulence was vaporizing my instruments. I was blind, lost, and spinning. I don't know how long I was there. Eventually, I heard the gentle crunch of footsteps on the gravel path. Marcus didn't say anything. He just lowered himself to the grass beside me, not touching me, just sitting in the space of my grief, a silent presence. "They said it was an IED," he said finally, his voice low and hollow. "On a route we'd cleared, one we'd flown over a dozen times. It wasn't there, then it was." I shook my head, the motion jerky. "We should have seen it. We should have seen the pattern, the disturbance, something." "We're good, Alina," he said, and I heard the same corrosive doubt in his voice that was eating me alive. "But we're not gods. We can't see everything. We miss things. The intel is wrong. The tech glitches. The bad guys get lucky." He let out a long, shaky breath. "I dream about it, the ones we can't get to in time, their voices on the radio. I wake up and for a second I think I'm still on headset." His confession shattered the last of my professional reserve. We were partners in the GCS, a single organism. We were partners in this, too. The failure, the grief, the weight, it wasn't mine alone to carry. The realization was a relief so profound it brought a fresh wave of tears, hot and shameful. I'd never let him see me cry. I'd never let anyone. I hear his voice," I choked out, the words torn from some deep, wounded place I didn't know I had. "Carter, I hear him saying, 'Thank God for you guys.' And all I can think is, did he thank God for us the day Miller died, or did he wonder where the hell we were?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know we can't think like that. It'll hollow us out. My dad, he lost my mom to cancer. He told me once that you can't measure your love by the loss. You have to measure it by the moments you had. I think maybe the same is true for this job. We can't measure ourselves by the ones we lose. We have to measure by the ones we save." It was a fragile lifeline, but I clung to it. We sat there in the grass as the afternoon light began to soften, two broken parts of a single unit, finding a new, more human connection in the shared shadow of our failure. Later, after a quiet dinner where Eris tactfully ignored my red-rimmed eyes, I checked my personal email on my phone for the first time all weekend. Nestled between a base exchange newsletter and a reminder about my dental appointment was a message from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple: "Thank you." I opened it. "Captain Vance, I hope this email finds its way to you and that it's not against any rules for me to contact you like this. It took some doing to get this address. Please don't get in trouble on my account. My name is Lieutenant Ben Carter. You and your team provided overwatch for my unit, Call Sign Sandcastle, a little over a week ago. You pulled our bacon out of the fire in a big way, and I don't think we properly thanked you. The official after-action reports are one thing, but I wanted to send something personal. I'm not sure what it's like on your end of the camera. I imagine it's easy to feel disconnected from the dirt down here. I wanted to tell you that from our end, you are a voice of pure calm in the middle of the storm. Knowing you were upstairs, watching over us, was the only thing that kept my guys steady. You gave me the clarity I needed to lead them out of there. 47 of my soldiers are home safe because of you. They have families, wives, kids, parents. Those kids have their dads because of the decisions you made that night. I can't speak for what you see or what you have to do, but I can speak for the men on the ground. Your work matters. It matters so damn much. Thank you for our lives. With the deepest respect. Ben Carter. I read it, then I read it again. The words didn't erase the image of Specialist Jeremy Miller's name on the news ticker. They didn't magically dissolve the guilt that had taken root in my chest. Eris Thorne's ghosts were still there, silent and heavy. But Lieutenant Carter's words, raw and heartfelt and direct from the dust of Helmand, did something else. They forced the two realities to collide inside me, the devastating loss of one and the miraculous saving of 47 others. They were both true. They both existed in the same space, in the same conscience. The emotional armor was cracked, and it would never seal itself perfectly again. But as I sat in a quiet house full of books, the faint scent of stew and tobacco in the air, the email glowing on my screen, I felt the first, faint stirrings of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not peace. Not yet. But the beginning of a painful, necessary balance. The air in the ground control station tasted the same as it always had. Chilled, sterile, filtered of everything but the faint tang of recycled oxygen and the ghost of old coffee. For 3 years, this had been the air of my world, the atmosphere of my war. But today, breathing it in as the reinforced door hissed shut behind me, it didn't feel like coming home. It felt like being sealed in a tomb. The silence was the first assault. After the dense, living sounds of the Pacific Northwest, the constant whisper of rain on cedar boughs, the chatter of Marcus and his father discussing some obscure historical text, the creak of an old house settling, the hum of the servers and the faint whisper of the air conditioning were a vacuum. The large, dark screens that usually promised a view of another hemisphere were blank, reflecting only the dim outlines of my own face, a pale moon in a dead console. My chair, with its worn leather and perfectly adjusted lumbar support, waited for me, but I hesitated to touch it. My leave was over. It was Tuesday. The 3 weeks, which had stretched into an eternity of unfamiliar green, had collapsed back into this single, suffocating point. The mission folder on my desk was thin, containing only my reentry paperwork and a directive for a psych eval at 1400 hours. The weight of it was negligible, yet it felt heavier than any combat load. I didn't sit. I stood there, my fingers brushing against the smooth, cool plastic of the control stick, the one that could guide a reaper with the subtlety of a thought. 47 soldiers. The number echoed, a mantra that had once given my work meaning but now felt like an indictment. I had saved them, but from a distance of 7,000 miles. I was a ghost in their machine, a voice from the void. The email from Lieutenant Ben Carter was a hot coal in my mind. You were our guardian angel up there. Angels shouldn't get panic attacks from the scent of damp earth. I left the GCS, the door hissing shut on the tomb, and walked the familiar, polished linoleum corridors to Major Chen's office. My footsteps, usually so measured, felt unnaturally loud. I didn't knock so much as tap my knuckles against the frosted glass, the sound swallowed by the dense quiet of the command wing. Enter. Chen was behind his desk, the glow of 2 monitors illuminating the weary lines of his face. He looked up, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something in his eyes beyond the standard command assessment, a flicker of concern, quickly masked by professional calm. Captain Vance, welcome back. I trust your leave was restful. It was leave, sir. My voice sounded flat, even to me. I remained standing, my posture rigid. I'm ready to return to duty. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. Your readiness is determined by medical, Alina. You know the procedure. The eval this afternoon is the first step. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. With all due respect, Major, the procedure is keeping me from my job, from my team. The words came out sharper than I intended. I pulled a folded printout from my pocket, the paper creased from being carried and reread. I smoothed it on his desk and pushed it toward him. This is from Lieutenant Ben Carter. 2nd Platoon, Bravo Company, one of the 47. Chen's eyes scanned the email. I watched his face, searching for any reaction. He was a statue. He finished reading and looked back at me, his expression unreadable. He's grateful, Captain, as he should be. He thinks I'm a guardian angel, I said, the words tasting like ash. He doesn't know I'm sitting in an air-conditioned box in Nevada, that I can order a strike and then go get a burrito from the commissary. This, I jabbed a finger at the paper, this gratitude is based on a lie. Taking me off the line now, after they've put a face and a name to my voice, it feels like a betrayal. Of them. Not of the Air Force, of them. Chen was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere past my shoulder, somewhere in a memory. The hum of his computer fans filled the room. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, stripped of its command cadence. I had a friend, he began, the words deliberate. Michael, we came up together, flight school, then our first remote tour. He was a good pilot, better than me maybe, witty, had a laugh that could cut through the tension in this place. He paused, and I saw the ghost of that laugh reflected in the faint sadness around his eyes. We were supporting a unit that had walked into an ambush, a bad one. It was chaos on the radio. Kids screaming. Michael was their only eyes. He found the enemy position, a nest of them in a compound. He talked the ground commander through it, cool as anything. We got the clearance. He fired. Chen's hands, which had been steepled, came apart. One hand closed into a loose fist on the desk. The missile was perfect. A direct hit, took out the hostiles. The ground commander came on the net, whooping, calling him a miracle worker. Saved a dozen men that day. He looked at me then, and the pain in his eyes was raw and immediate, a wound that had never fully closed. The next day, Michael didn't show for his shift. They found him in his apartment. He'd taken his service weapon. There was no note, just the after-action report from the day before, open on his tablet. He never said a word to me, not a hint. The sterile air in the office suddenly felt heavy, thick with the weight of this unspoken history. The official report listed the mission as a success, and it was, on paper, but Michael couldn't reconcile it. The disconnect. The whiplash of being a god of death one minute and a man picking up dry cleaning the next. He carried the lives he saved, but he couldn't shake the weight of the lives he took. The silence after the cheering ended, it broke him. Chen's gaze was unwavering now, pinning me to the spot. So when I see one of my best pilots showing the same signs, the hypervigilance, the emotional detachment, the inability to disconnect, I don't see a soldier trying to shirk duty. I see Michael. And my duty, my first duty, is to make sure I don't lose another one. A broken pilot saves no one, Alina, not in the long run. My order to stand you down doesn't come from a lack of faith in your ability. It comes from the painful knowledge of what this job can do to a person. The fight drained out of me, leaving a hollow, cold understanding. His motivation wasn't protocol, it was grief. The confrontation was over. He had disarmed me not with authority, but with vulnerability. I understand, sir. I hope you do, he said, his voice returning to its normal timbre. Go to your eval, be honest, that's an order. The base psychologist's office was designed to be calming. Soft, neutral colors, a comfortable chair, a generic landscape painting on the wall. It was a poor imitation of the real world I'd just left, a bland caricature of peace. Dr. Miller was a woman in her 50s with a kind, patient face that I immediately distrusted. It was a professional kindness, a tool of her trade. We went through the preliminaries. The sleep questions, the appetite questions, the standard battery designed to tick boxes. I gave her the answers I thought would get me back to my chair fastest. Fine, normal, no issues. She listened, making notes on a tablet. When the structured questions ended, she set the tablet aside. Captain Vance, Major Chen is concerned. He says you're one of his most focused, most reliable operators. He also says that recently, that focus has become rigid. He mentioned an incident of heightened anxiety during your leave. It was a crowded market, I said, my voice tight. Loud, it was disorienting. Disorienting how? I looked past her at the bland painting of a meadow. I tried to find the words. For the last 3 years, my world has been a desert seen from 20,000 feet. It's stark, clear. You see a heat signature, a pattern of life, it's data. The world I was in on leave, it was all green, cluttered. There was no clarity. Everything was alive and crowded, and it was too much. Too much life, she asked gently. The question undid me. It was like a pinprick in an overinflated balloon. The composure I'd so carefully maintained, the emotional compartmentalization that was my primary survival skill, ruptured. I'm a ghost, I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. I felt a hot pressure behind my eyes. I'm a voice on the radio. I watch over them for hours, days sometimes. I learn their routines, their nicknames. I know when one of them is a joker, when one is quiet. I see them hug each other after a close call. I am part of their lives, but I'm not. When they bleed, I don't smell the blood. When the IED goes off, I don't feel the concussion in my chest. I just see the thermal bloom on a screen. A tear escaped, tracing a hot path down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I deliver death from a place of absolute safety. I offer salvation without sharing any of the risk. And the gratitude, that's the worst part. They thank me like I was in the dirt with them, like I shared their fear. But I didn't. I was safe. I am a ghost who pretends to be a guardian angel, and the lie is eating me alive. I put my head in my hands, the sobs coming in quiet, shuddering waves. I cried for the soldiers whose faces I knew better than my own relatives. I cried for Major Chen's friend, Michael. I cried for the profound, unnatural schism at the heart of my existence. For the first time, I gave voice to the silent scream that had been building for 3 years, and the sound of it, raw and broken, filled the calm, sterile room. Dr. Miller didn't speak. She just waited, a presence in the storm of my grief. When the tears finally subsided, leaving me hollowed out and exhausted, she spoke softly. "Thank you, Alina, for not being a ghost in here." Later that afternoon, cleansed and raw, I went back to the GCS. I told myself I'd left my headset there, a flimsy excuse to re-enter the one place that still felt like my territory. I tapped my access code, and the door hissed open. And I froze. Someone was in my chair. A lieutenant I vaguely recognized from the day shift was seated there, his posture unfamiliar, his hands resting on the controls with a casualness that felt like a violation. Marcus was in his own seat to the right, his back to me, but I could see the set of his shoulders, a different kind of tension than when we worked together. This was professional, efficient, but lacking the silent, telepathic synergy we had built over hundreds of missions. The lieutenant turned, noticing me in the doorway. "Can I help you, Captain?" His voice was young, confident. He didn't know he was sitting in my skin. He didn't know that this chair wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was an extension of my will, the cockpit from which I had woven lives and deaths. My headset, I managed to choke out, my voice strangled. Marcus turned now, and his eyes met mine. In them, I saw a reflection of my own shock and a deep, shared sadness. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. A warning, don't. "I think I saw it on the rack by the lockers," the lieutenant said, already turning back to the blank screens, dismissing me. I backed out of the room, the door closing on the sight of my partner and a stranger inhabiting my life. The shock was profound, a physical blow to my chest. My identity wasn't just being questioned in a therapist's office, it was being physically erased, my place taken by a placeholder. I was a veteran pilot, a master of my domain, and in that moment, I felt more obsolete and invisible than I had even in the crowded green chaos of the civilian world. I walked back to my temporary quarters, a small, impersonal room that smelled of cleaning solvent. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dim light. I opened my email and clicked on Ben Carter's message. "You were our guardian angel up there." For an hour, I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply field. What could I say? That his angel was grounded. That the voice from the sky was just a woman who cried in a psychologist's office and got vertigo from the sight of trees. I thought of Chen's friend, Michael. I thought of the ghost I had confessed to being. And I thought of Marcus, trying to build a new rhythm with a new pilot. The weight of the 47 was still there, but it had changed. It was no longer a monument to my success. It was a connection, a responsibility that demanded honesty, not divinity. My fingers found the keys. The typing was slow, hesitant at first, then with growing certainty. "Lieutenant Carter," I wrote. "Thank you for your email. It means more than you know. Please don't think of me as an angel. Think of me as your lead scout, the one with the best vantage point. I'm glad I could have your back that day. Tell your men I said hello and to stay sharp." I paused, then added the hardest sentence, the most honest one. "It's good to hear your voice, too." I didn't sign it with my rank or a formal closing. I just typed my name. "Alina." And I clicked send. The message vanished into the ether, a tiny, fragile thread cast across the continents, tethering this ghost, finally, to the world of the living. The drone of the Creech air conditioning was a familiar white noise, a sterile hum that used to fade into the background of my consciousness. Today, it was the first thing I heard, a constant, high-pitched reminder of the sealed, pressurized world I was re-entering. A week had passed since I'd stood in Major Chen's office, my composure a thin veneer over a core of shattered glass. A week of mandatory sessions with a psychologist named Dr. Evans, whose office smelled of lemongrass and patience, where I'd talked about things I'd sworn I'd buried in the Afghan sand. The doc had cleared me for duty, conditional duty. My new schedule was a patchwork of shifts and appointments, a framework designed not for maximum operational output, but for sustainable human function. Chen's doing. His pragmatism, forged in the fire of a personal tragedy I now understood, had built me a cage with a functional door. It was infuriating, and though I was reluctant to admit it, a relief. I pushed open the heavy door to the ground control station. The light was the same, Dim, artificial, casting long shadows from the banks of monitors. The air was the same, chilled, odorless, recycled to death, but the woman walking into it was not. Marcus was already at his station, the sensor operator's chair creaking slightly as he swiveled to face me. His expression was a careful neutral, but his eyes, always so damn expressive, held a galaxy of unasked questions. "Captain," he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. "Sergeant," I replied, sliding into the pilot's seat. The leather was cool through my flight suit. I ran my hands over the familiar controls, the stick, the throttle, the myriad of buttons whose functions were muscle memory. They felt different. Not alien, but weighted. Each one was heavier, its purpose more profound. "Welcome back," he said, the words simple but layered with meaning. It wasn't just a return to the GCS. It was a return to us, to the silent, symbiotic dance we performed in this little box 8,000 miles from the war. "Good to be back," I said, and for the first time, it wasn't entirely a lie. The mission briefing was standard. A presence patrol was moving through a contested valley, a route known for IEDs and sporadic small arms fire. Our job, overwatch, eyes in the sky, guardian angels. The term didn't feel like a mockery anymore. It felt like a mantle, one so heavy it could break your shoulders if you didn't know how to carry it. The Reaper was already on station, its feed crystal clear on the large screen in front of us. The landscape unfolded below, a vast tapestry of sun-bleached browns and grays, ridgelines sharp as knife edges, wadis snaking through the dust. It used to look like a simulation, a high-definition video game with consequences I intellectually understood but emotionally distanced. Not today. Today I saw the texture of the earth. I saw the way the wind rippled through the sparse, dry scrub. I saw the heat haze shimmering above a mud brick compound. It was real. Brutally, achingly real. This was a place. People lived there. People died there. "Eyes on the patrol," Marcus said, his voice all business now, his fingers dancing over his own console, adjusting the camera. The image zoomed, stabilized. 6 figures, tiny from this altitude, moved in a loose diamond formation. They were ants in a giant sandbox, so vulnerable it made my throat tight. The radio crackled to life. "Reaper 1, this is Nomad Actual, radio check over." The voice was young, taut with the professional tension of a man walking through a potential kill zone. It was a voice I'd heard before, in a different context, filled with a different kind of emotion. It was Lieutenant Ben Carter. A jolt went through me. Of course it was his unit. The universe, or the Air Force's scheduling computer, had a vicious sense of poetry. Marcus glanced at me, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He'd made the connection, too. I keyed the mic, my own voice steady, a professional calm I had to consciously construct. "Nomad Actual, Reaper 1, reading you Lima Charlie. We have you visual. 6 packs, moving east along Route Delta. No visible threats at this time." A brief pause. "Copy that, Reaper. Good to have you upstairs." There was something in his tone, a warmth beneath the military brevity. He knew it was me. He'd sent the email. He de-thanked me. He'd called me an angel. And here he was, down in the dirt, trusting me to be exactly that. The patrol continued. The minutes stretched, thick with a silence that was entirely different from the tense void of my last mission. This was an attentive silence, a shared vigilance. Marcus and I didn't need to speak. A slight adjustment of the joystick, a barely perceptible tilt of the camera, and we were both tracking the same potential shadow, assessing the same rock formation. Our symbiosis was intact, but refined. He was no longer just my emotional barometer. He was my partner in this renewed, solemn pact. I found myself communicating more, my commentary for the ground troops less robotic, more descriptive. "Nomad Actual, we're scanning the tree line to your north. It's clear, but the ground is broken there, good cover for movement. Advise giving it a wide berth." "Copy, Reaper, thanks for the eyes." It was a small thing, a tactical note I would have made before. But before, it would have been data. Now, it was a conversation. I was talking to Ben Carter, a 24-year-old man with a life he almost didn't have, a life I'd helped preserve. I was talking to his men, each one a story I knew nothing about, each one a son, a brother, a father maybe, whose story deserved to keep being written. The shift ended without incident. No missiles fired, no calls for fire. A quiet day, the greatest success in our grim business. As the screens went dark, the reality of the dim, cool GCS rushed back in. The transition was still jarring, the whiplash of leaving a sun-scorched battlefield for a windowless room in Nevada. But the disconnect was no longer a chasm. It was a bridge, and I was standing firmly on it, aware of both ends. Marcus let out a long, slow breath, the kind he usually reserved for after a kinetic engagement. Well, that was a Tuesday. It was, I said, unclipping my harness. The silence that followed was comfortable. He was waiting for me to lead. I need to see the major, I said. Chen's office door was open. He was where he always was, behind his desk, but he wasn't staring at a report. He was looking at a faded photograph in a simple wooden frame, his thumb absently tracing its edge. He didn't look up immediately, giving me a moment to see the man behind the rank, the weary slope of his shoulders, the quiet grief that was his constant, unwelcome companion. He was protecting us from becoming what had taken his friend. I knocked softly on the doorframe. He looked up and the mask of command settled back into place, but it was thinner now, more transparent. "Captain Vance, come in." I stepped into the office, stopping in front of his desk. I didn't stand at attention. This wasn't that kind of meeting. "How was the shift?" he asked, his voice neutral. "Quiet," I said. "It was different." He nodded slowly, placing the photograph face down on the desk. Dr. Evans's report was favorable, cautiously so. I read it. And I took a breath, choosing my words with care. The resentment I'd carried since he'd grounded me was still there, a cold, hard pebble in my gut. But I understood its composition now. It was made of fear and grief and a desperate desire to avoid feeling the very things that had threatened to shatter me. "The order was the right one, sir," I said, the words feeling true as I said them. "It was the hardest order I've ever been given, but it was right." Chen's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. He hadn't expected contrition. He'd expected a fight or sullen acceptance. "This job, it consumes from the inside out, Alina. It pretends it doesn't need a whole person to do it, but it does. A broken pilot saves no one. A ghost at the controls might as well not be there at all." "I know that now," I said. "I was becoming a ghost." I met his gaze. "Thank you for not letting me." He gave a single, sharp nod. The matter closed. The respect between us was no longer just professional, it was deeply, painfully personal. We were both keepers of the same terrible knowledge. "The war isn't going anywhere, Captain. It'll still be there tomorrow. It can wait for a pilot to heal." The truth of it settled over me, not as a burden, but as a permit. Permission to be human. Permission to step away from the screen without abandoning the people on it. I found Marcus leaning against his beat-up sedan in the parking lot, the Nevada sun a pale, watery imitation of the one we'd just been watching. The heat was dry and carried the distant smell of creosote and asphalt. "Coffee?" he asked, pushing off the car. "The stuff in there is basically motor oil." "I thought you'd never ask." We drove to a quiet place off the base, a generic coffee shop filled with the gentle hiss of steam and the low murmur of civilian conversation. It was jarringly normal. We found a small table in the corner, away from the windows. The ceramic mug was warm in my hands, a tangible anchor in a world that felt suddenly soft at the edges. For a while, we just sat in silence, two soldiers decompressing, letting the adrenaline of the shift, even a quiet one, slowly dissipate. The war was in the ring, and we were in the corner, taking a breather. "You talked to Chen?" Marcus finally asked, blowing on his coffee. "Yeah. And we're good." He smiled, a real easy smile that reached his eyes. "Good. He's an asshole, but he's our asshole." I couldn't help but return the smile. Something like that. The conversation drifted, for the first time in what felt like years, away from the immediate. Away from the next mission, the last mission, the constant, grinding now, we talked about the future. An abstract, hazy concept that had never felt like it truly belonged to us. "My dad asked when I'm gonna visit again," Marcus said, staring into his cup. "Says he's got a new theory about the fall of Rome he wants to bore me with." "You should go," I said, and I meant it. The image of Dr. Eris Thorne, with his kind eyes and quiet wisdom, felt like a balm. He was a link to a world where history was something in books, not something you made from the sky. Maybe I will, Marcus mused. After this rotation, you could come, he'd like that. He'd probably try to convince you that Thucydides has all the answers to modern drone warfare. The offer was so simple, so normal it was revolutionary. A plan, a thing to do after. It held the faint, fragile promise of a life that existed beyond the GCS. I'd like that, I said, and the words felt like a key turning in a long-locked door. Later, alone in my quarters, the silence was no longer an enemy. It was just silence. The sterile environment was just a room. The war was over there, and I was over here, and the connection between the two was me. A whole person, not just a set of eyes and a trigger finger. I thought of the 47, the number that had hung over me like a judgment, a scoreboard of salvation that somehow underscored my own failure. I let the number unravel in my mind. It wasn't a number anymore. It was a face I knew, Ben Carter's, smiling in a hospital bed, his gratitude a tangible force. It was the 46 faces I didn't know. The young private who probably went home and got a dog, the seasoned sergeant who taught his daughter to ride a bike. The medic who saved other lives, the joker who made his squad laugh in the middle of hell. They were stories. Individual, messy, ongoing stories. I had not ended their stories. I had helped them continue. The weight of that responsibility remained. It would always be there, a core of granite in my soul. But I was no longer crushed by it. I was grounded by it. It was the weight that gave me purpose, that gave my own story meaning. It was a weight I had learned, finally, how to carry.